first step there is the determination of the properties, rights to interest in properties, which should form part of the gross estate. So, we already had the general rule that properties, rights to interest in properties belonging to the decedent at the time of his death are generally included in the gross estate. However, we said specifically the properties that will be included in the gross estate will depend on the classification of the decedent that you have. We classify decedents into two kinds. First, Filipino citizens and resident aliens. And then non-resident aliens at the time of death. Now, specifically, we said, with respect to Filipino citizens and resident aliens, properties, rights to interest in properties, whether located within or without the Philippines, will be included in the gross estate. That is true whether the property is real property, tangible personal property, or intangible personal property, wherever situated, included in the gross estate. But in the case of a non-resident alien decedent, what will be included in the gross estate will only be properties, rights to interest in properties located within the Philippines, meaning real properties of the non-resident alien decedent located in the Philippines, tangible personal properties located in the Philippines, and then intangible personal properties located in the Philippines, except we say if the rule on reciprocity is applicable. So therefore, it becomes necessary if your decedent was a non-resident alien decedent at the time of his death, the determination of the situs of the properties belonging to the decedent at the time of death becomes material, becomes relevant. Because what you will include in the gross estate will only be what? Properties, rights to interest in properties located within the Philippines. Unlike in the case of Filipino citizens and resident alien decedents, what you will include in the gross estate would be properties, rights to interest in properties, wherever situated, whether that is real property, tangible personal property, or intangible personal property, or even mixed type of property according to the Mindon. So, how do we determine the situs, the location of the property for purposes of determining the gross estate? With respect to real property will be considered as located in the place where it is situated. So also with respect to tangible personal properties. Tangible personal properties will be considered as located in the place where they are found. But in the case of intangible personal properties, the general rule is res mobilias contur personam. the location or the situs of intangible personal properties follows the residence and domicile of the owner. So wherever is the residence or the domicile of the owner, that is the location of the intangible personal property belonging to the decedent. But that res mobilia secundor persona has exceptions. What are the exceptions there? If the location of the situs of the property is specifically provided for by law, or if not, if equity and justice require that the intangible personal property should be located in a place other than the residence or domicile of the owner. So if equity and justice will require that the situs of the intangible personal property should be considered as located in a place other than the residence or domicile of the owner. Now, look at the first exception. Exception for res mobilia secundor personam. You will know the first exception says that intangible personal property will be considered as located as a rule in the residence or domicile of the owner, except what? Except if the law specifically provides. Now, you will find under section 104. You look at section 104, you will find the first exception there. Because under the second proviso of section 104, you will find there intangible personal properties which should be considered as located in the Philippines, regardless of the residence or domicile of the owner. Look at them. You have first franchise, which must be exercised in the Philippines. So, a franchise which is being exercised in the Philippines is considered as intangible personal property located in the Philippines, regardless of the residence or domicile of the owner. Same with shares, obligations, or bonds of a corporation or sociedad anónima organized or constituted in the Philippines. In other words, shares, bonds, or obligations of domestic corporations or domestic juridical entities, regardless of the residence or domicile of the owner, if it is shares, bonds, or obligations of domestic corporations or juridical entities, they will be considered as located in the Philippines. The same with shares, obligations, or bonds of any foreign corporation where at least 85% of the business of that foreign corporation is located in the Philippines. The shares, the bonds, the obligations of that foreign corporation will be considered as having a situs in the Philippines. Then also shares, bonds, or obligations of any foreign corporation which have acquired a business signpost. Say for instance, shares of stock of a foreign corporation with less than 85% of its business located in the Philippines. If these shares of stock were used as guarantee for a loan in the Philippines, then you can say the shares of stock have acquired business cycles. Or if the shares of stock, for instance, were pledged in the Philippines to secure the payment of the loan, then that will be considered as having a situs in the Philippines because it has acquired that business situs. And the last instance is in the case of shares or rights in any partnership, business or industry established in the Philippines. So here you have different kinds of intangible personal properties which should be considered as located in the Philippines regardless of the residence or domicile of the owner. However, you will know that in the case of Wells Fargo Bank versus Collector of Internal Revenue, the Supreme Court there has also ruled that res mobiliae secundor persona will not apply if the doso would be contrary to justice and fairness. Because according to the Supreme Court, that principle of res mobiliae secundor persona is a mere fiction of law based on consideration of general convenience in public policy. But that principle cannot be applied to control or limit the power of the state to impose taxes. Now, so you have now there the general rules that you will use to determine whether property rights or interest in property would be included. Now you will remember when we were defining estate tax, we also said that estate tax does not only apply to gratuitous transfers of properties, rights to interest in properties, effective upon death. But we said estate tax also applies to transfers of properties, rights to or interest in properties which are considered by the law as equivalent to testamentary disposition. Now you will find here that this rule covers transfers of properties, rights to or interest in properties made by the decedent while he was still living, and yet upon his death, the value of these properties, rights to or interest in properties, will still form part of the gross estate. Now, what is the reason for the rule that these transfers of properties, rights to interest in properties, considered as equivalent to testamentary disposition will still be subject to state tax? This is to prevent evasion of the state tax. The decedents would resort to substitute testamentary disposition. So, here, what are now the transfer of property, rights to interest in property, though made by the decedent while still living, yet considered by the law as equivalent to testamentary disposition. You find that under Section 85. Section 85, B, C, and D. That Section 85, B, C, and D. You'll find the different kinds of transfers of property, rights to property, or interest in property, though made during the lifetime of the decedent, yet considered by the Internal Revenue Code as equivalent to testamentary disposition. Hence, we said, the value of the property, rights to interest in property, already transferred, will still form part of the gross estate of the decedent at the time of the death of the decedent. So, what are now the different transfers of property, rights to interest in property, which are considered as testamentary disposition? Look at Section 85B. You have transfers in contemplation of death. Second, you have revocable transfers of properties as to. And then the third one, properties passing under a general power of appointment. So these are the different types of inter vivos transfers. And yet, treated by the Internal Revenue Code as what? Equivalent to testamentary disposition. So therefore, the value of the property, rights to interest in property, though already transferred, while the decedent was still living, will still be included in the gross estate of the decedent upon his death. But what are now the different kinds of transfers of properties, rights to interest in properties, which are considered as transfers in contemplation of death? You have three kinds there under Section 85B. First, you have transfer by trust or otherwise made in contemplation of death. Then secondly, you have transfer by trust or otherwise, which are intended to take effect in possession or enjoyment up or after death of the transfer of decedent. And the third instance there is transfer of property, rights to or interest in property by trust or otherwise, where the decedent transferor retained. There was retention of what? Of possession, enjoyment, or the right to the income from the property, rights to interest in property. or retention of the right to designate, either by himself alone or in conjunction with any person, to designate the person who shall what? Possess, enjoy, or receive the income from the property, rights to interest in property transfer. So these are the three types of transfers in contemplation. Now you will note in the third instance, there must be retention of certain rights or interest on the property transfer. And the retention there may be what? Possession, enjoyment, income to the property, right to designate the person who shall possess, enjoy, or receive the income from the property. But for how long may the retention of this right or interest be? It may be for life, or it may be for a period which does not impact end before the death of the transfer of the decedent. So the period for retention may be for life, meaning until death. The transfer of the decedent may have retained those rights, possession, enjoyment, and so on, until death. Or he may have retained those rights for a period which does not impact end before his death. But you have exception. Exception is if the transfer is a bona fide sale for an adequate and full consideration in money or money support. Because if that is the case, then the property rights or interest in property transfer will not anymore be included in the gross estate of the decedent. Exception. Take note of that exception very well. But what is the meaning there of a transfer in contemplation of death? What is meant by in contemplation of death? A transfer in this instance will be considered as made in contemplation of death if the transfer was made by the decedent transferor because of the thought of his impending death. In other words, the transferor decedent was impelled by the thought of his death in order to make the transfer. In other words, also, the motivating factor or the controlling motive for making the transfer of the property rights to or interest in property is the thought of death of the decedent. So here, if the transfer is made by the decedent or the decedent was induced to make the transfer because of his thought of death, then the transfer must be considered as what? Made in contemplation of death. But you must understand here that in contemplation of death does not mean the general idea of death entertained by every person. Sooner or later he will die. That is not what is meant by that. But what is meant here by in contemplation of death is that the transferor decedent made the transfer of property rights or interest in property because of his thought of an impending death. The reason why he made the transfer of property rights to interest in property while he was still living is thought of impending death. So, what circumstances may be taken into account in determining whether the transfer was in contemplation of death or not? Or what circumstances may be taken into account? Like, for example, the age of the transferor deceded at the time he made the transfer. Then, the concurrent making of a will or the making of a will within a short period of time after making the transfer. Then the state of health as known to the decedent at the time he made the transfer. Or the number and value of properties being transferred by the decedent in comparison to the properties that he is retaining. And also the gift-giving history of the decedent. And finally, the recipients of the property transfer, or the recipients of the property being given by the decedent, while still living. They may be compulsory heirs of the decedent. So let us say that X is 90 years old. He is afflicted of advanced diabetes. He believes he is dying. Because of such belief, X donated all his properties to his children who accepted the donation. Six months later, after the donation, X died. The question is, should the properties already donated to the children be still included in the gross estate of the decedent? Of course, the answer is yes. Why? Because the transfer was made in contemplation of death. So although the properties there were already transferred or donated to the children of the decedent, and the donation was accepted by the children, yet the value of these properties already donated will still be considered as part of the gross estate of the decedent at the time of his death. But you will note that in the problem that we have, the decedent died 6 months after making the donation. Suppose he died 1 year after the donation. Will the properties be still included in the gross estate? Mr. Asero. Will the properties there be still, meaning the properties donated to the children, will they be still included in the gross estate?
Yes, sir.
At the time of death, which occurred 1 year after the death.
Yes, sir.
And why is that so?
As long as the donation made by the decedent was in contemplation
So
of
why
death.
is that the case?
Because the donation, sir, by the decedent, even though it was even though the death came after 1
That's
year.
why there is that even after the lapse of 1 year after the transfer, you will still consider the value of the properties donated to be still in included in the gross estate
Um,
of the decedent?
because the law provides, sir, that the law does not provide any duration as long as the donation rate.
So note that very well. The Internal Revenue Code does not fix a period by which this donation of transfers and contribution should be considered as included in the process. As long as it is shown that the transfer, the donation in this case, was made in contemplation of death, then the value of the properties, rights or interest in properties, already transferred during the lifetime of the decedent will still be included in the process. Now you take a few steps.
Thank you, sir.
But suppose in that problem that we have, the properties donated, the properties there donated had a fair market value of 10 million. But instead of the transfer by donation, the decedent there sold the properties to his children for 10 million pesos. In the same problem. Let us say that the fair market value of the properties there, which were donated, was 10 million pesos. But instead of the transfer by way of donation, the transfer was by way of saving to the children for the amount of 10 million pesos. Should the value of the properties sold be still included in the gross estate? Mr. Galala.
Sir, I think no, sir.
Why not?
Because there was, sir, a sale.
So then?
Consideration of.
So then?
There was full consideration, sir, but then it was released.
You will find that that falls within the exception under section 85B. That transfer, though in contemplation of death, would be considered as a bona fide sale for an adequate and full consideration in money or money's worth. So therefore, not meaning the properties sold will not anymore form part of the gross estate of the decedent. But note very well that may be subject to another internal revenue tax. If you still remember your income tax. Ayaw take this. But suppose in that same problem, the properties there were all real properties. And they were all capital assets. But the properties were sold by the decedent while still living to his children. Note the fair market value was how much? 10 million. Let us say that it was sold, or the properties were sold to the children for only 1 million. Then subsequently, the decedent died. The transfer. Will the properties already transferred be included in the gross estate? The transfer was still in contemplation. Death. It transfer was sale of the